My grandmother, Elsie, wasn't exactly warm. Pragmatic, fiercely independent, and with a spine of steel, she was more akin to a weathered oak than a blooming rose. Growing up, visits to her farm were mandatory, less a loving tradition and more a carefully scheduled obligation. We'd arrive, my siblings and I, freshly scrubbed and meticulously behaved, knowing any infraction would be met with a withering look and a terse, often cryptic, correction. The farm itself was her life. A sprawling, 100-acre plot nestled in the Appalachian foothills, it was a patchwork of fields, orchards, and dense woodland. She ran it single-handedly after my grandfather passed, a feat that impressed even my city-dwelling parents. The house, a rambling farmhouse that had been in the family for generations, was filled with antique furniture, the air thick with the scent of dust and beeswax polish. When she passed away last month at the ripe age of 92, none of us were particularly surprised. She'd been slowing down, her grip on the farm loosening. The reading of the will was a somber affair, attended by my immediate family, my uncle, my mother's brother, and his wife, and a local lawyer who looked like he'd stepped out of a black and white movie. The will was straightforward. My uncle inherited the bulk of her savings, a sizable sum, apparently, and various pieces of valuable antique furniture. My parents received a small parcel of woodland bordering the property, and my siblings and I each received a modest sum of money, earmarked for our education. It was all perfectly reasonable, perfectly fair. Except for one thing. Buried at the end of the document, almost as an afterthought, was a clause stating that I, Elsie's youngest granddaughter, would inherit the farm itself, house, land, livestock, and all. The silence that followed was deafening. My uncle turned an apoplectic shade of purple. My parents exchanged bewildered glances. I, meanwhile, was completely speechless. I had always assumed my uncle would inherit the farm. He had expressed interest in it over the years, hinting at plans to modernize it, to turn it into a profitable agri-tourism venture. My mother had always nodded sagely, agreeing that it was the sensible thing to do. Me? I worked in marketing, lived in a cramped city apartment, and had zero experience with farming. I could barely keep a houseplant alive, let alone manage 100 acres of land. There must be a mistake, my uncle sputtered, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage. The lawyer, a man of few words, simply adjusted his glasses and reread the clause. There was no mistake, the farm was mine. For the first few weeks, I was in a state of bewildered panic. My uncle launched into a campaign of subtle, and not so subtle, pressure, suggesting I sell the farm to him, that I wasn't equipped to handle it. My parents, while more supportive, were also wary. They reminded me of the sheer amount of work involved, the financial burdens, the isolation. I considered selling. It would be the easy thing to do. Take the money, invest it, and continue living my comfortable, predictable life. But something stopped me. It was more than just the sentimental value of the place. It was a feeling, a whisper in the back of my mind, telling me that there was something more to this inheritance than just land and buildings. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I quit my job, packed my bags, and moved to the farm. The first few months were brutal. The house was in disrepair, the fields overgrown, the livestock, a handful of aging cows and a flock of surprisingly aggressive chickens, were a constant source of frustration. I was clueless, overwhelmed, and utterly exhausted. I learned to milk a cow through YouTube tutorials. I spent hours pulling weeds, my back aching, my hands blistered. I learned the hard way that chickens will peck at anything that moves, and that a tractor is not, in fact, a glorified car. I called my mother almost every day, usually in tears, begging her to convince me to sell. She was sympathetic, but firm. "Give it time," she'd say. "Your grandmother saw something in you." And then, one day, I stumbled upon it. It was hidden in the attic, tucked away in an old wooden chest filled with yellowed linens and moth-eaten blankets. A small, leather-bound journal. Elsie's journal. I hesitated before opening it. It felt like an intrusion, a violation of her privacy. But the curiosity was too strong to resist. The first few pages were filled with mundane entries about the weather, crop yields, and the daily routines of farm life. But as I continued reading, The entries became more personal, more revealing. She wrote about her loneliness after my grandfather's death, her struggles to keep the farm afloat, her doubts about her own abilities. And then, she wrote about me. She wrote about how she saw a spark of something in me, a resilience, a quiet strength that reminded her of herself. She wrote about how she believed I had the potential to do something great, something meaningful, but that I was being held back by the constraints of my city life. And then, I found it. An entry dated almost a year before her death. I found something, she wrote. Something that changes everything. Something that has been hidden on this farm for generations. The next few pages were filled with cryptic clues, references to historical events, and descriptions of hidden locations on the property. It was like a treasure hunt, a puzzle left for me to solve. I spent weeks poring over the journal, deciphering the clues, exploring the farm. I followed the references to old maps, historical documents, and local legends. And finally, I found it. Hidden beneath an old oak tree in the deepest part of the woods, I found a small, stone-lined well. Inside the well, nestled in a waterproof container, was a box. Inside the box was a collection of documents, deeds, letters, and a map. The map was old, hand-drawn, and marked with a large X. The X marked a location on the property, a location that I had never noticed before. It was a small, unassuming hillock, covered in wildflowers. I had walked past it countless times, never giving it a second thought. Following the map, I dug into the hillock. And there, buried just a few feet beneath the surface, I found it. Not gold, not jewels, not some ancient artifact, but something far more valuable. I found evidence, documents, letters, and photographs that revealed a dark secret about my family's history. A secret that had been carefully hidden for generations. My ancestors, it turned out, had been involved in the Underground Railroad. The farm had been a safe house, a haven for slaves fleeing to freedom. The hillock, I realized, was a mass grave. My grandmother knew about it. She had dedicated her life to protecting the secret, to honoring the memory of those who had sought refuge on her land. And she had left the farm to me, not just as an inheritance, but as a responsibility. The jaw-dropping part? The well wasn't just a hiding place. It was connected to a network of tunnels that ran under the entire property, used to secretly transport people from the slave states to the north. Now, I'm not a historian, nor am I a saint. I had no grand illusions of suddenly becoming some social justice warrior. But I couldn't ignore what I'd found. The weight of the history, the lives that had been affected, the sheer scope of it all, it was overwhelming. So, I changed my plans. I contacted a historical society, experts in the Underground Railroad. I shared the documents, the map, the location of the hillock. Together, we began the painstaking process of documenting the site, of preserving the history, of honoring the memory of those who had been buried there. The news spread like wildfire. My uncle, predictably, was furious. He accused me of sensationalism, of trying to profit from a tragic chapter in history. But the local community rallied behind me. Donations poured in. Volunteers arrived, eager to help with the excavation and preservation efforts. The farm is no longer just a farm. It's a historical site, a monument to courage and resilience. It is being transformed into a museum and educational center, a place where people can learn about the Underground Railroad, about the struggles and triumphs of those who fought for freedom. I'm still learning. I'm learning about farming, about history, about myself. I'm learning that my grandmother wasn't just a stern, pragmatic woman. She was a protector, a guardian of a secret that had the power to change the world. And I understand now why she left the farm to me. She didn't just see potential in me. She saw a connection to the past, a willingness to embrace the responsibility of preserving the truth. The inheritance wasn't just land and buildings. It was a legacy, a burden, and an opportunity. An opportunity to make a difference, to honor the past, and to build a better future. And honestly, it's the most worthwhile thing I've ever done.